What type of real estate should you invest in? Today I'm going to be talking about the different asset types and the kind that's going to be the best for you and your investment style. If this is the first time you're watching this channel, my name is Tim Diesel. I'm a commercial real estate consultant. This channel is designed to give you investment strategies and tips in your business, or if you're a broker, this will definitely help your clients in their business. All right, so the first thing people put their money in is apartments. Usually apartments are a good transition. Apartments, multifamily, whatever you want to classify it as. Most people start off with a single family home. So they have the home for whatever, a couple of years, they build up, they get 2, 3, 4, then they get into apartments. And it just kind of depends. You start off small, maybe 10, 15, 20 units. I've seen them go up as high as 50 or 60 in a matter of years, right? And if you're really aggressive, you can own hundreds of these things. If you have syndications, if you have other groups, apartments. So apartments are really the easiest transition, easiest step into commercial real estate, and it's the one that most people understand. Most people either live in apartments, they kind of know how they work, they know how rent leases are, and they can figure out what the average rents are in the area pretty easily. Kind of like a single family home, right? We can always figure out the comps, go online, we can get a good understanding of it. So apartments is the first thing you can invest in. Next are mobile homes. Mobile homes are also easy because you're in charge of the entire park, and most people that rent there are in charge of whatever's on the inside. Now there's other nuances to it, obviously, but the idea is mobile homes are another way you can invest your money. High percentage returns, higher than apartments. Most people get a 10, 12 percent return. So you get a 12 cap on a mobile home park, whereas an apartment building, you're probably looking around 8 cap or something. Because of the management style, because of the appreciation, the leverage, a little tougher to get a loan on a mobile home park. That's why there's a lot of owner financing. It just kind of depends. So you have to make it very attractive. A lot of them are older too. Most mobile homes are not new. They're not building a whole lot of new ones, right? A lot of them are older. Next couple, student housing, assisted living, and hotels and motels. And I'll kind of break these down for you a little bit. Student housing and assisted living, they kind of rent by the room, more or less the same thing. You're renting the doors or the space available. So there's really nothing more complicated than that. You're in the rental business of a commodity based, right? Whoever's there, you're gonna lease to them, you're gonna rent to them. Almost the same thing. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Hotels and motels, you're kind of operating it as a business. You're just getting rent daily rather than monthly. So almost the same thing, but again, you're just operating it as a business. Now, depending on the size of the hotel, you could also have a restaurant in there, dry cleaning. You can have other things associated with the hotel. But on the small scale, let's say you're 20, 50 unit hotel, or maybe a small motel, maybe 15 unit motel. It's just rented by the night. That's the only difference. By the room, by the night, other than renting it for whatever 30 days or a 1-year lease. And most of the time, you probably need to have someone on site to give people fresh towels, whatever the case is, even if it's a small motel. The negative side about all of these different asset classes are the management. Someone's got to manage these things, and they're very heavy management intensive assets to own, right? If it's an apartment, depending on the size of it, if you have a 20, 30 unit apartment building, someone's got to be on site. Same thing with a hotel. No matter how big or how small, someone's got to be there to take care of these people. And that's the only issue. If you have to have the management aspect of it down, or you have to have a management team. Something's got to be there. That's the only thing I'm not too crazy about when it comes to people going really big, really crazy. They don't have a management team in place. So your returns could be a little more on the high side, but your downside is the management. Financing is really good. Most of the time you can finance apartments. They're favored by almost all banks. Hotels, up and down. For the most part, mobile homes have never really been 80% financing since I've seen them actually. But everything else you can really get pretty favorable financing. And that's what makes them attractive for everybody. And everybody understands them. So it's very easy to talk to an investor. Hey, we're buying this building, this many units. They love hearing that sort of thing. So that's the advantage. Disadvantage is the management. You got to have your management in place. All right, the next thing are office buildings. Office buildings aren't exactly my idea of a great investment, right? If you're buying an office building as an owner or user, then it makes sense. Maybe you're a doctor or something like that, and you want to start a practice with a couple partners, maybe you're an attorney. That kind of makes sense. For the most part, in today's day and age, not everybody needs an office. They can work from home. So it just kind of depends how you are positioning yourself with this office building. If you're an owner user, I think it's fantastic. If you're buying an office building to try to get long-term returns, then you really want to have good tenants in place, long-term tenants in place. Most people don't like signing a 10-year office lease. That's usually not the case. And then also in terms of management is kind of not as aggressive as multifamily, but for the most part, if something isn't working in someone's space, they're gonna let you know. If maybe the lights or the AC or something, office, they're usually not as, I don't wanna say problematic, but they need their office building to work and be functional. And the financing on them are usually not as aggressive, but you can get as high as 75%, maybe you can get 80, just kind of depends, but not as favored as apartments, right? Because if you're gathering investors, most of the time, you're not gonna gather 20, 30 investors and say, hey guys, we're gonna buy a huge office building and we're hoping for a gigantic tenant to land on this thing. So office building is probably not for beginning investors, but it's usually something you could have down the road. But it is a class you could explore. All right, next is retail. You can invest in retail buildings specifically. Now, there are different types of retail, right? There's strip centers, and the neighborhood strip center is something about maybe 5,000, 10,000 square feet. We've all seen these. They have a barber shop, a sub shop, place where you can get some sandwiches, and maybe a nail salon, hair salon, that kind of thing. And then you're gonna have your anchor tenant, like a big grocery store, and then I'll have other stores with it, power center, outlet center, and a single tenant, like let's say a Walgreens or something, CVS, where it's just one tenant. Don't focus on the gigantic stuff where you're going to the outlet malls and shopping malls and all that stuff yet. If you're gonna get started, get yourself a single user, a single tenant, or a strip center, right? That's kind of what you'd want to invest in. You wouldn't want to go for the big stuff. Maybe for your first deal, 150,000 square feet. That might be a little extreme. So you can definitely start off on some of these small. Now you can also be an owner user, right? Let's say you're gonna start something where you want to start your own restaurant, and you figure, hey, I'll just buy the building, I'll start my own restaurant, I can operate out of it, pay rent to myself. That's an idea, people do it all the time. It just kind of depends on what you want to do. But you could be owner user in this case. Most of the time, depending on what size you're gonna go with, you can round up investors quite easily. Banks are not very crazy about retail, but that said, if you have long-term leases and franchise tenants, regional tenants, they like that a little bit. If you have Paul's Pizza Shop and Paul's a startup, you may have some challenges there, right? Because we don't know how long they're going to be around. And that just really depends on the leases. This is all lease driven, all income driven. It doesn't really matter. It just depends on how much money is coming in and can you cover the amount of mortgage that you have on the property. All right, guys. The last class is industrial. So industrial is distribution centers, fulfillment centers like a big Amazon or something like that, storage, warehouse space, and flex space is kind of office, kind of industrial. So that could be kind of in the middle where you have a warehouse in the back and you'll have like a small office in the front. That's kind of popular. It just kind of depends on what you're looking to do. Now, if you're in something that Maybe you have a drywall business or something like that. Now you could utilize the space in the warehouse for your business, and you don't want to keep leasing that. Maybe that could be a good investment for you. Long term, that could be good. The problem with the warehouse is it's usually single tenants. And when that tenant leaves, that building is not as attractive to an investor. Now, that said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means, depending on the life of the lease, that's what fluctuates the most. Gathering investors for these types of properties are not as exciting also, because if it's vacant, you're not going to have a whole lot of people want cash flow. They're getting into these properties because they're looking for a return on their money. So definitely could be a great starting place, because depending on the size of the warehouse, right? If you're buying like a 200 square foot warehouse, maybe that's a little excessive. But if you're buying something small, and it could be storage, it could storage also is run like a business, right? So if you have a storage center, that's kind of run like a business, because people go in, go out. So look at that a little bit differently. If you have just a warehouse and you have one tenant, well, maybe that's not so bad, but it's just kind of depends. Now in terms of loans, same thing, it's all by the leases. The banks care about how long the lease is and how strong they are. So they really grade the tenant. They don't grade you so much. They want to see what's the tenant like before they give you a loan for that property. But industrial is another one you could get into. Also, there's special use, like a gas station, a church, school, that kind of building. Be careful with some of these properties, just because financing is not as easy sometimes, like a car wash, that might be in special use. They're not as favored, but it is kind of dependent on the business. In other words, same thing, if the business leaves, that building is just kind of, four walls, like it really isn't producing anything. So it's like land. If you're buying land, what are you doing with the land? How does the land appreciate in value? Well, if there's nowhere else to build and you have the only land available on, Main and First or Second, whatever, then you're going to be the prime location. But once you build on it, and that property is worth a lot more. So special use would kind of be something just to be careful on. Now, if you've got a lot of extensive experience running the business in that class, then you might be okay. Land and special use for beginning investors, I usually tell them kind of go the other way. If you're doing land, you want to be development, right? Because you don't want just land to own that, because it's not making you very much money. All right, guys, let's recap. So we covered apartments, office buildings, retail buildings, industrial buildings, special use, and land. So if you're a beginning investor and you don't have very much money, maybe you want to get started, you don't know what to do. You wouldn't necessarily go out there and try to find land and redevelop it, right? That would be a really tough one. It just kind of depends on what stage you're in, what you're doing, how much time you have, what experience you have. On my website, you can download a guide. It's a free tool. It's an investor's blueprint. I mean, I created that for beginning investors. Even if you're seasoned, it just kind of helps you break down where you're going to get started, what you're planning on doing. But this really depends on you. People always think apartments are the best to get into. Not necessarily, because what if you're buying a 10-unit building and you don't have a management company or you don't have a management team? You're probably going to be the one doing most of the management, because you're not making enough money to hire management. If you're a little bit on the older side and you don't want to deal with a lot of the headaches, maybe retail's for you, because you can get a single tenant in there for 10, 15 years and not have to worry about very much. If you're a lawyer and you're starting up your practice, maybe owning the building might be beneficial. So it really just kind of depends. There is no best one. Everyone's different. You just have to depend on where you are, what you're starting, what you already have. A lot comes into play, but I wanted to break these down for you just to give you an idea of what to look for. All right, guys, today's question is, what is your favorite asset class? What is your favorite type of investment? Comment below. I'd like to know what it is. Hey guys, like this video, subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Definitely, I answer all of them. And thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.